getting 30 feet or 40 feet out and then you shoot the last 30, or how do you get to that 60 feet?
That depends more on the line that you're using, okay? So, in the past, before a lot of these short head shooting lines came out, we would be casting from a standing position. Let's say you were bone fishing. You would be on the deck and trying not to step on your line, making sure that it's in a coil below you. When the guide spots the fish at 50 feet, you need to get your fly there in as few casts as possible. So, standing on a wind-driven boat in tidal water, you might have 4 seconds to have a legitimate shot at that fish. So typically what we would do with the older, sort of more traditional weight-forward lines is as you begin to cast, you're not only going to haul, which I'll talk about, you're also going to slip line on the back cast and the forward cast. So basically, if you can visualize this, as I'm making my back cast, I'm slipping line, grabbing it, coming forward, slipping line, grabbing it, making my back cast, and then shooting the line to the fish. A lot of the new, like the Quick Shooter series from Rio, their Flats Pro line is killing. It's a front end loaded line, and you can get to 70 feet with one false cast. They really are cool lines. So that's to answer your question. It does have more to do with the line that you're using.
Because I find when I get a lot of line out, I have trouble again keeping the loop above the line. It's hard to manage once you get a ton of line out.
And a ton of line for you may be completely different than a ton of line for you. A ton of line for you might only be 30 feet if you're mainly fishing small streams. A ton of line for you if you're fishing carp or smallmouth bass on a lake or anywhere where you need to air out a lot of line might be 70 feet. 70 feet's a long cast.
It's a long cast.
Okay? Even with a single hand rod in steelhead and Atlantic salmon situations, a 70-foot cast is a long cast. In fact, most guys will go their entire life and never have to do it. 60 is what I like to shoot for in terms of getting you or my students to a sort of a benchmark. 60 feet's what I shoot for. And I'll even mark on the line at 60 feet. Once you get there, then continue doing what you're doing. But if you're getting to 60 feet regularly with a single hand rod, you're getting the job done. Because odds are pretty good if you can get to 60 feet, then you can probably get to 65. But beyond that, you're compromising a lot.
My thought was that the rod had a certain amount of line out that was made to load the rod. And once you go beyond that, you have more weight in the rod. I don't know if that's true or not. That was my point, yes.
It's true, and we're getting into some really, well, no, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning. I think it's worth talking about. So fly lines are measured or weighed in the first 30 feet. Traditionally, everything's changed now with rod manufacturers going with grain weight designations rather than the AFTMA line weights, like a 6 weight being 165 grains. Everything's sort of changed a little bit, but for all intents and purposes, a fly line is measured in the first 30 feet of line. So a 6 weight line is 165 grains. If you're perpetually casting your 6 weight line, your 6 weight rod, only 20 feet, then you don't have the proper amount of grain weight to make that rod work perfectly. So you're better off to overline it. I was with a client a few years ago and he was telling me about an article that he read about underlining fly rods.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I can't think of a single situation where I would require underlining my fly rod. So he sent me this article. This was back before email. He sent it to me in the mail. which I thought was kind of cool. And what this guy was talking about, he was a Scotsman, and he was fishing primarily on locks, and he was fishing very small, like 18s and 20 blue-winged olives, often 2 or 3 flies, but on 6X tippet to rising trout, and if you got too close to those fish, they would just keep moving away. So his point was, if he was fishing a 6-weight, he underlined it by 1 line because he was aerializing or carrying a lot more line than the average dude would do, and he was able to just get a slightly nicer, more delicate presentation with that. We're really starting to pick fly shit out of pepper when we're talking about stuff like this, but their overlining is good, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I overline everything from my 3-weight up by at least 1 line. Some of them by 2. But even in the hands of what I would consider a marginal caster or an average caster, you're going to notice a big difference. Fast rods are easier to cast. Sure. That's all there is to it. And this is why the manufacturers keep pushing the envelope into faster, 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 faster. But they're not better. You're compromising a lot when you get into the ultra fast rods. And if any of you out there own a Sage X or a Sage Method, don't get me wrong, they are wonderful rods. But when you get into, let's say we're fishing a 4-weight, when you get into the modern ultra fast rods like the Loomis NRXs, the Helios, the Sage X, or the Method and the it was not the X, the 1. You're compromising a lot. That 4-weight rod in that ultra fast action, and by the way, there's no standards in actions. It's very, like I pick up one of my Winston boron rods, and they call it fast, but I consider it quite slow next to some of the modern Sage rods. So there's no standards. It's very, very arbitrary. But with those super fast rods, you're turning a 5X tippet into a 6X tippet.
Or less.
Or less. Because when you set that hook, everything happens so quickly that the tendency to pop that off. Whereas a more trouty action, like your old, the old Sage VPSs or the LLs, some of the old Winston rods.
Yep.
When you set that hook, it's
forgiveness.
Exactly. You're far more forgiving. So if I'm in casting competition, yes, I want the nicest rod that I've ever cast. I use that loosely. The nicest, the rod that I was able to do the most with, was a Thomas & Thomas NH. They called it the NS. They called it the No Sanctuary, which was really a cool name for a rod, but this thing was a friggin' rocket launcher.
Cannon.
I was casting 33 feet of backing with a full 100-foot line in a 6-weight, but it had no heart. It was just way too fast. It's not a rod that I would fish with.
It's
my trout rod is still my 20-year-old Sage VPS, the 89.3, 89.4 3-piece VPS, because it does have some heart. It does bend deeply when you set the hook. It's far more forgiving during the fight. But most of the premium rods out there, I hate to say it, if you're planning to come to my shop tomorrow and drop $1,200 on a rod, please do it, but get with me first. Most of them are not good fishing rods. They're great casting tools, but they're not great fishing rods. So keep that in mind, and I think that that's another good takeaway. There are a lot of really good $200 to $400 rods on the market today. The rod that I'm fishing with when I'm out, and I know there's a lot of guys in the river, and I don't want to be using a rod that I don't sell, is the Echo Carbon XL. It retails for about $230, $250, and it is an absolute gem of a rod. I'm telling you, you can't go wrong with it. So, owning a shop, I get some pretty good deals. That's the rod that I choose to fish with 75% of the time.
Okay.